We returned from our trip and found a number of strangers gathered at the village. They were gathering from the country about, and a number of the masters were congregating for a pilgrimage to a village about 225 miles distant. We wondered at this, for we had been in that direction and found that the trail traversed what we called a sandy desert. It was in reality a high plateau covered with sand hills that the wind had shifted back and forth, and where but little vegetation grew. Beyond this desert, the trail led over a small range of mountains, which is the spur of the Himalayas. That evening, we were invited to accompany the expedition, and were told we would not need to take more cumbersome part of our outfit, as we will return before crossing the main Himalayas. The expedition was to start the following Monday. Of course, Jast and Nepro had everything in readiness, and early Monday morning we swung into line with about 300 others. The greater portion of these had infirmities for which they were seeking healing. All went well until the following Saturday, when there arose the most severe thunderstorm we had ever experienced. There was a perfect downpour for 3 days and nights, a forerunner of summer, as they called it. We were camped in a very concealed place and did not suffer from the storm. Our greatest anxiety was about provisions, for we were certain that this prolonged delay would cause serious inconvenience to all concerned, as there was but enough brought along for the trip, not counting delays. This delay seemed doubly serious to us, for as we saw it, there was no place to replenish our supplies unless we returned to our starting points, possibly 120 miles distant, a greater portion of which lay over the sandy desert already referred to. Thursday morning, the sun rose clear and beautiful, but instead of pushing on as we had expected, we were told that we would wait where we were until the trails had dried and the rivers had receded, so we would proceed more comfortably. We were all fearful lest our provisions should be exhausted, and one of our party voiced this fear. Emile, who had charge of the whole outfit, came to us and said, "You need not fear. Does not God take care of all his creations, both great and small? And are we not his creations? You will see that here I have a few kernels of corn, or corn seed. I will plant them. By this act, I have definitely said that I want corn. I have formed corn in my mind. I have fulfilled the law, and in due season it will come forth. It is necessary for us to await the long, arduous process that nature, in her slow growth and unfoldment, will take in order to grow corn. If so, we will be obliged to wait a long, hard time to obtain it. Why not use a higher or more perfect law, given us by the Father, to produce it?" All that is required is to become quiet and visualize or idealize corn. And we have corn cured, ready for use. If you doubt it, you can gather it, grind it into meal, then make it into bread. There, before us, was corn, grown and cured, so that we did gather it and grind it, and afterwards made it into bread. Then Emil went on to say, this you have seen and believe, but why not use a more perfect law and bring forth a more perfect thing, or exactly what you want? Bread. You will see by using this more perfect, or as you would say, more subtle law, I'm able to bring forth exactly what I need. Bread. And as we stood there spellbound, a large loaf of bread was in his hands. Nor did the supply stop until there were 40 loaves upon the table before us, placed there apparently by Emil himself. He remarked, you see, there is sufficient for all. If not sufficient, more can be supplied until there is enough and to spare. We all ate the bread and pronounced it good. Emil continued, when Jesus at Galilee asked Philip, whence shall we buy bread? He did this to try him, for within himself he knew full well that there was no necessity to buy the bread needed to feed the assembled multitude, nor to secure it through the material market then in existence. He saw the opportunity to prove to his disciples the power of bread leavened or increased by the Spirit. How often man in the mortal concept thinks as did Philip. He was calculating, as human consciousness is calculating today, from the visible supply on hand, thinking he had only so much bread, or so much supply, or so much money with which to buy. Jesus recognized that the one in Christ consciousness knows no limitation. He then, in Christ consciousness, looked to God as the source and creator of all and gave thanks for the power and substance right at hand to fill every want. He then broke and distributed through his disciples to those in outer need until the need was supplied. And then there remained 12 baskets over. Jesus never depended on the oversupply of another to fill his need or the need of another, but he taught that all supply is right at hand in the universal substance where all supply exists, and all we need to do is to create it or bring it forth. Just so, when Elijah multiplied the widow's oil, he did not apply to someone having an overabundance of oil, for had he done this, the supply would have been limited. He contacted the universal, and the only limit to the supply was that all the vessels were filled. The supply could have flowed on until this day had there been vessels to receive it. This is not hypnotism. None of you feel that you are in any way under a hypnotic spell. Let me say that the only hypnotism is the self-hypnotism of believing that each and every one cannot do the perfect works of God and create the desired condition or thing. For is not the need itself the desire to create? Instead of unfolding and creating as God wills us to create, you fold up in your little shells and say, I can't. and you hypnotize yourself into actually believing that you are separate entities apart from God. You simply fall short of your perfect creation or expression. You do not let God express perfectly through you, as it is His desire to do. Did not Jesus, the great Master, say, "The works that I do, ye shall do also, and the greater works than these shall ye do"? Was it not Jesus' true mission here on earth to show that we, as sons of God, or man in his truest state, can create as perfectly and as harmoniously as God does? When Jesus commanded the blind man to bathe his eyes in the pool of Siloam, was not this intended to open the eyes of all? All were to see that Jesus was sent by the Father to show us the Father intended us to create exactly as He creates. All are to do perfect work as Jesus did by recognizing the Christ in Himself and in all. I can go one step further. This loaf I just received and held in my hand is consumed as though burned by fire. What happened? I misused the perfect law that brought forth my conception and consumed that which I brought forth because of my misuse and not using rightly or righteously the perfect law, which is exact as music or mathematics or any other so-called natural law. If I persisted in the misuse of the perfect law, it would consume not only that which I create, but would consume me, the Creator. Is the bread really destroyed? We will admit the form is changed. For in place of the loaf, we have a small amount of dust or ashes. Has it not in reality been returned to the universal substance from which it sprang? Is it not now in manifest form, unmanifest form, waiting to be brought again into manifestation? Is this not the way with all forms? They go from our sight either by fire or decay or in any other way. Do they not return to the universal substance, God, from which they sprang? Is this not the meaning of what descends from heaven must ascend into heaven? A short time ago, you saw ice formed without any apparent cause, as you perhaps think of it. Let me say that that is the same as creating the bread. I can use the law to obtain ice as well as bread, just as long as I use either as a benefit to mankind or as long as I am working in living accord with the law or expressing as God wishes all to express. It is good for all to make bread or ice or any and all things desired, and all must press on to the stage at which they can do these things. Can you not see that by using the highest law, the absolute law of God, you may bring forth that which you need or conceive in mind as your highest idea, and thus please God more fully by manifesting more fully, knowing as Jesus did that we are perfect sons of God? Does not this suggest freedom from commercial bondage as well as all other bondage. As I see it, the commercial bondage will, in a few years, become the greatest bondage of all. If it goes on at the rate it is now progressing, it will dominate man, soul, and body, and it cannot do otherwise than consume itself and those that are interested in it. There is no question but that the first inception of commercialism was on a high spiritual plane, but materialism was allowed to creep in until the very power used to create is the power that will consume. Just as the very power to create will always consume if not used rightly. It's not the pressing of commercialism and limitations upon us crowding us on to see that we must come over or overcome these conditions. Is not this done by simply realizing that we ought to do perfect works of God to raise our consciousness to the Christ consciousness? Is not this what Jesus taught us here on earth? Does not his whole life exemplify this? My dear brothers, do you not see that in the beginning there was the Word, and the Word was with God? At this time, everything to be formed later was in unmanifest form in the universal mind substance, or as expressed by some, in chaos. This word in the original was actuality. This word, chaos, is misinterpreted to mean a turbulent or warring state instead of the deep spiritual state of actuality, always awaiting a definite, creative, spoken word through which it can spring forth into manifest form. When God, principle, desired to bring forth the world out of the universal mind substance, God was quiet and contemplative. In other words, God saw an ideal world. He held in mind that substance of which the world was to be formed, a sufficient time to lower its vibration. Then he spoke the word, and the world was formed. Or, as we might say, God visualized a mental pattern or mold into which could flow the substance needed to make the world, and it came forth a perfect form, built upon the pattern which was held in consciousness. All these things might have been thought of by God, infinite power. He might have wished during an infinite time or indefinite time that they were formed and made visible. Had not the definite spoken word been put forth into formless ether, nothing would have been created or brought forth into visible form. In order to establish invisible results, the thought and desires of even an infinite, omnipotent creator, and bring orderly forms out of actuality, it took the definite, positive, let there be. So must we take the definite step. God is holding the ideal, perfect world in mind in every detail, and it is bound to come forth as a heaven or perfect home where all his children, all his creatures, all his creations may dwell in peace and harmony. This is the perfect world that God saw in the beginning, and the one he is thinking into existence right now. And the time of its manifestation lies in our acceptance of it. When we can come to the one place and know that we are all one man, and know that we are all members of God's body, as much as one member of our body is a part of the whole body, then we are in and of God's kingdom, heaven here on earth, now. To make this manifestation, realize that there is nothing material in heaven. All is spiritual. Realize that heaven is a perfect state of consciousness, a perfect world here on earth now. All we need to do is to accept it. It is here all about us, waiting for us to open the inner eye. Through that eye, our bodies shall be made light. The light which is neither of the sun nor moon, but of the Father. And the Father is right here in the very innermost parts of our being. We must sufficiently realize that there is nothing material, that all is spiritual. Then we must think of that wonderful, God-given spiritual world, which is right here now, if we can realize it. Do you not see that God created all in this way? Did not God first become quiet and contemplate it and see the light? Then he said, "Let there be light." And it was so. In that same way, he said, "Let there be firmament." And it was so. And likewise with other creations, he held each form or ideal steadfast in consciousness, then spoke the word, and the ideal was brought forth. Just so with man, God said, "Let us make man in our image, after our likeness, and give him dominion over all." God, all good, created all things good. Man, the greatest and last, with full dominion over all. Then man saw only good, and all was good, until man separated himself from God and saw duality, or two. Then he, by his thought, created two, one good and the other the opposite. For if there were two, there would be opposite, good and evil. Thus evil came through man's perfect power to express or bring forth that which he gazed upon. If man had not seen evil, evil would have been given no power of expression. Only the good would have been expressed, and we would be as perfect as God sees us today. Would not heaven always have been here on earth as God sees it? And as we must all see it, to make it manifest. Jesus had a perfect right to say that he came from heaven. For did not all come from heaven, the great universal mind substance? Since man was created in the image and likeness of God, did not God give man the power to create exactly as he creates? And does not God expect man to use that power as freely as he uses it in exactly the same way? By first perceiving the need, then conceiving the good, the idea with which to fill the mold, that we hold in consciousness, and which is to be filled from the universal mind substance, then sending forth the word that is filled, that is so, and it is good. Jesus, when he was crucified, gave of his flesh, the outer, what we see of the body, to prove that there is really a deeper spiritual body. And it is this spiritual body that he manifested when he came forth from the tomb. This is the body of which he spoke when he said, "Destroy this temple, and in 3 days I will raise it up again." He did this to show us that we have the same spiritual body and that we can do all the works he did. There is no question that if Jesus had wished to do so, he could have saved himself. There is no doubt but that he saw there was a great change taking place in his body. He also saw that those about him were not able to see that they also could bring forth the spiritual body, as he was attempting to have them see. They still looked to the personal. He saw if he brought forth the spiritual body without some decided change, the people would not be able to discern between the material and the spiritual. So he adopted the way of the crucifixion to bring about the change. Truly, is not this the Christ in man, which the great Master, Jesus, whom we all love and reverence, came to show? Did he not unfold his life here on earth to show us the perfect way to God? Can we do other than love the perfect ideal way when we once see it, whether it be planted seed, making bread, or doing the millions and one other things necessary to human existence? Are not these acts mere lessons carrying us on to our unfoldment? Someday, we are to realize that we are truly sons of God, not servants. That as sons, we can have all that the Father does, and that we can do it just as freely as our Father does. I admit this takes a mighty faith at first, one that usually must be taken step by step and must be practiced faithfully like music or mathematics until we come to the place of knowing. Then we are grandly, beautifully free. Could there be a better, truer example of this life than that of Jesus? Can you not recognize the power that this is in his name, Jesus the Christ made manifest, or God manifesting through the flesh man? Jesus came to the place where he relied wholly upon his deep knowledge and understanding of God. And this is how he did his mighty works. He did not rely upon his own willpower or upon strong, concentrated thoughts. Neither must we rely upon our own willpower nor strong, concentrated thoughts, but upon the will of God. 'Tis not my will, but thine, O God, be done. Will to do the will of God. Do not think that Jesus willed in all things to do the will of God, or to do what God willed him to do. You will note that very often Jesus is referred to as going into a high mountain. Whether he physically ascended a high mountain or not, I do not know. This I do know, that we must ascend to the heights. the very highest in consciousness to receive our illumination. This height means the very top of our head, the very top of the head. And there, if the faculty is not developed, we must develop it by spiritual thoughts. Then, from the heart, the love center, we must let love flow forth to balance all. And when this is done, the Christ is revealed. The Son of Man perceives that he is the Son of God, the only begotten Son, in whom the Father is well pleased. Then, with constant love, we must realize this for all. Just stop and think deeply for a moment and realize the countless numbers of the grains of sands on the seashore, the countless numbers of the drops of water that go to make up the waters of the earth, the countless numbers of life forms in the waters of the earth. Then realize the countless numbers of the rock particles that are contained in the whole earth, the countless numbers of trees, plants, flowers, and shrubs upon the earth, the countless numbers of forms of animals upon the earth. Realize that all are the outpicturing of the ideal held in the great universal mind of God, that they all contain the one life, the life of God. Then think of the countless number of souls born upon this earth. Then realize that each soul is a perfect outpictured ideal image of God as God sees himself. That each soul is given the same power, expression, and dominion over all that God himself has. Do you not think that God wills or wishes man to unfold these godlike or God-given qualities and to do the works that God does through the inheritance given man by the Father, the one great universal mind in all, through all, and above all? Then realize that each person is an expression or pressing out from the unseen, the spirit, into the visible form, the form through which God loves to express. When we can realize and accept this, we can truly say, as Jesus did, behold, a Christ is here. It is in this way that he attained his mastery over the worldly or flesh self. He recognized, claimed, and accepted his divinity, then lived the life just as we must do.